for us, it's important to see what you're looking at, and then perhaps get your coworker to look at it and say, does this look right to you? And if it doesn't look right, what do you see? Well, and then you may go to another person and say, hey, what do you see? So after you've established that something's not right there, then it's important to know what you're looking at, and to report it. So you want to report it, first of all, to your purser or whoever's in charge, and then it needs to go to the flight deck so that they are made aware that there's a suspected case of human trafficking on board, because everybody has to be on the same page, and that goes back to CRM and how important CRM is to maintain communication between all the different players or partners, in any scenario. So, and then the flight deck's responsibility then is to notify ground personnel. So if you back up and look at what can be done, you want to notice things like if that person is not in control of their documents, their ID, that's a key. Bruising or on their bodies, or barcodes. Tattoos are very popular, but some tattoos are indication that that person is another person's property. They may avoid eye contact. And as flight attendants, we are charged to walk through the cabin every 15 minutes, engage in conversation. But you find somebody perhaps that looks like they are frightened or ashamed or anxious around anybody, especially people in uniform. They avoid eye contact. They give you a scripted story or inconsistent stories. They might tell one flight attendant they're going to visit family. They might tell another flight attendant they're going for a job interview.
All right.
So
if a few people go and engage in conversation,
yes, you might see that you're getting different stories. Exactly. Yeah. And then you don't want to alarm them or the trafficker, because then you might put that victim and yourself in danger. So it's important to maintain control, and that's something we're taught to do anyway, especially in emergencies. We have to maintain control because that's the way that we can rationally respond and not react. That's the other piece of this is we don't want to react to a human trafficking situation because your gut feeling is to do something about it. What's important is to respond to it, and you respond to it by reporting it to the right person or people, and making sure that you have the information that you need to report it. Then the next phase of that can happen, and that is for the captain to report detailed information. And then once that goes to ground services, they can put in place their protocol and what they're supposed to do. That only happens, it starts with us. Fortunately, flight attendants and flight crew members in uniform, even though a victim may avoid people who are in uniform and those in authority, we represent a safe place. We represent safety, and that's already been proven in the cases that have been published and publicized about victims who have left notes in the bathroom to be rescued and on napkins. They feel safe with us, not just because we are in a uniform and we're in control of that airplane, but also because we are responsible for caring. Our first concern needs to be safety and security. The last one is service, but we do all of that with compassion and care. So I remind people to care, especially if you see a human trafficking incident. Yeah. CARE is an acronym that we developed to help someone who can't necessarily remember everything they're supposed to do. Because if you see something that you think really is a human trafficking incident, our first instinct as flight attendants is do something. You know what I mean? We solve this problem. But in this situation, you don't want to confront the individuals. You don't want to alarm anyone because you don't want to put anyone in jeopardy. You do want to report what you see, and then if you want to make sure that you don't expose yourself or anyone else. The E is to expose yourself or anyone else to danger. Right. So it's real important to see what you're looking at. And we only do that when we are really situationally aware. We all have lives and things going on outside of our lives, but when traffickers began to use the aviation industry to move human beings around, not just the country, but around the world, to be trafficked and exploited. They did it based on the fact they take for granted that we are not paying attention. We're concentrating on safety and security, and we spend a lot of time on service when we are first safety and security specialists. Service is the last thing we do, but we can do the safety and security with a smile. And that's why they take for granted that we're not going to be paying attention. They take for granted that a flight that's late at night, where we're supposed to do a 15-minute walk around, that it's not going to happen, that other things could happen. They take for granted that, and especially now in this day and time, that they can say to us, it's not your business, and we have to accept that. But if it's inside your aircraft, it is your business. And if, when people first started talking about human trafficking, it was a human rights issue. It was a correctional issue. It's a global issue. But if an individual is on our airplane, inside our aircraft, and they are not safe, it then becomes cabin safety issue. If they are held against their will, or they're being transferred against their will, they're being moved from one place to another, going where they, against their will, that's an issue of cabin safety, because now that's their security is in jeopardy. When you look at the 4 phases of flight, the 4 phases or levels of danger or conflict, then you look at the fact that person now has been threatened. And if it were if it were a flight crew member that was threatened, we know what level that is. But if it's another passenger that is threatened, then it becomes safety and security, because then you involve everyone on that plane. Everyone on that aircraft then is now a part of that safety and security issue. So human trafficking is just another form of slavery. And if people are being enslaved and moved on our airplanes, it is our business to do something about it. It's no different than if they were being put on there with chains around their necks and shackled. And if someone brought 5 people on board shackled together, unless they were correctional, police officers moving prisoners, we would go, wait a minute, you can't do that. And it's the same thing. We have to look at it that way if they are being moved against their will. Human trafficking is not just sexual exploitation, and they don't do it just by using violence and force, even though that is one form, one method of control. There's also fraud and coercion. So let's look at fraud, because that's something we as flight attendants see more often than we think. We see young people getting on a plane who are answering a Facebook ad, no experience necessary, all expenses paid. And when they get there, they find out they're going to be trafficked. They're going to be kidnapped. They are going for a job that they never actually get and never get paid for.
Yeah, those are quite difficult to spot when you have in a cabin.
Well,
they might not travel with someone who's kind of controlling them or
let me tell you 2 instances.
Escorting.
We have 2 incidents that come to mind immediately. One was a young lady who was answering a Facebook ad. She was going to meet a man she had never met before. He bought her a plane ticket. She met him on Facebook. She'd never actually seen him. She only saw pictures of him, and she was answering a Facebook ad. And so she met the guy on Facebook, and he bought her a ticket and sent for her. She'd never seen him before. That flight attendant asked her a few questions, and red flags went up. He's actually not picking me up. His friend is picking me up, and he's going to... So that's one of those, that she just found out in conversation, just in plain conversation with this young lady. And indeed, that young lady was going to be trafficked. The person that was picking her up, they traced it back, and that individual was taking her to a studio to make pornographic videos, and she was going to be forced to do it. She didn't know where, even if she knew where she was, she didn't have any way to get home. They weren't going to let her make a phone call, So that's just one incident, and that just happened in conversation. There's another incident. One of our flight attendants, who is based in Chicago, her regular route is Chicago-Moscow. And once a month, on the same days, twice a month, every other week, on the same days, there would be a group of teenage girls that were all giddy and giggly and, laughing, and they're going to America to be movie stars and models. They barely spoke English. And so she says, well, you have a manager, an agency, and they're going to get you a job. She said, no, they told her that When they get to Chicago, they have to take a bus to New York.
Oh, bus to New York.
These are all red flags, you know. So those are the kind of scenarios that we'll be confronted with. And you're right, it's hard to spot it, but in simple conversation, by being situationally aware and looking at what's around you and who's around you, then it's quite possible to get information that will be critical. And that's one of the other things about the flight attendant position. We have access to critical information that would be helpful. You know, and those kind of details are details that need to be passed on. Perhaps that situation isn't controlled at that moment, but it's very easy then, if we have that information and we pass it on to Customs, Border Control, whoever the local police are, then they can investigate and find out who purchased the ticket. Oh, this person purchases a ticket every other week and has a different companion flying with them every other week. Those are all signs, red flags that go up and say, let's stop and take a look at what's going on here. But that only happens when we are reporting it. So maybe that particular incident we report doesn't get followed up with the way we think it ought to. Maybe nobody is arrested at that time. The first incident of reporting by an airline ambassador, trainer, one of us, aboard our flight, resulted in the rescue of 83 children. It was one situation, and it was a flight attendant that saw this little girl between 9 and 11 years old. She was sitting on a window. She looked scared. She was hungry. You know, she was eating in the main cabin. Offered a drink. She wasn't allowed to get a drink. The gentleman sitting on the aisle seat was much older and did not look like her. Did not look like he was even related to her, but she was traveling with him. There was a seat between them. The flight attendant tried to engage her in conversation. She wasn't allowed to talk to her. He wouldn't let her talk. She just looked out the window and she was scared. Tried to give her a cookie and something to drink. He wouldn't let her take it. Finally, the little girl had to go to the bathroom. When she got up to go to the bathroom, he followed her. He went with her. And when she went to shut the door, he put his foot in the door. And she said, "Sir, you have to let her close the door." And he said, "Don't tell me what to do with my property. I own her." So that she reported it to the flight deck. They followed up. Once they landed, they were met and followed to baggage claim. The man was arrested, and that resulted in 83 children in a whole nother city being rescued. So it's simple observation, recognition, and reporting it that make a difference. They may not be in control of their documents. They may have bruising on their body. They may have tattoos on their body. They may look malnourished. They may look drugged and lethargic. And quite often traffickers will use drugs as a means of controlling. Now, let me say this. We've got dogs that sniff out drugs. Sure you do. Let me see that ink pen. See this ink pen? They will take this out. They take the lead out. They fill this with cocaine. Put the top back on. Guess what? When they go through Customs or TSA, oh, it's just an ink pen. It writes. But she takes it to the bathroom. He gives it to her. She takes it to the bathroom. She uses the cocaine, gives it back to him. That's how he controls her. They've become very sophisticated in just how they control.
So even through addiction.
Yes, absolutely. So they may appear drugged or lethargic, and quite often, especially if they're young girls or young boys, it's not all girls, young boys, they may drug them in order to move them about where they just look lethargic and out of it. They may not be dressed appropriately for where they're going. So they might be going to Las Vegas and it's cold and they're in a little skimpy outfit. Something's not right here. And they're traveling with somebody that they're not affectionate with and doesn't look like somebody that they want to be attached to or intimate. Right, there's no bonding between them. But these are the kind of things that we have seen in the past and we're like, what's wrong with her? Why is she? But we don't do anything. We're not even sure what we're seeing, you know. And I would say that when people see me today, they don't see me as, they cannot understand how I ended up as a human trafficking victim. My traffickers used coercion and threatened my family and threaten me with what they would do to me or my children if I didn't do what I was told. So that's another way that they move people around, especially if they're going to be traveling with somebody. They may not even speak the language, so they may have an interpreter. The interpreter may either be the trafficker themselves or working for the trafficker. And so that person may not be forthcoming with information. You know what I mean? But it looks like something's not right here, but that person won't even speak up because they're afraid of what might happen to their family at home. So I talked about fraud, which is when they answer those ads that no experience necessary, or they promise them jobs. More often in South America and in Asia, they're promised a job. You're going to be able to send money home to your family. You know, you're going to have a better life for your daughter if you send her away with us. And the reality is they get where they're going and they don't have the, control of their documents. They are not paid or for a long period of time. And when they are paid, now you got to pay for where you've been staying and the clothes you've been wearing and the food you've been eating. They never are actually given the money that they were promised to send home or do anything else with. If they're on a visa of some type and they weren't smuggled into the country, the visa runs out, they're just put out. They have no way to get home. They may not understand the language. They're afraid of everybody. They don't know who to trust because now they're here illegally. They don't want to get locked up. So these are the kind of things that we might see and not know what we're looking at. We just have to pay a little bit more attention. As I said, they may not be dressed appropriately for where they're going. And the other thing is they won't make eye contact. That's a big deal. Making eye contact, and if they do, you've got to be able to look at them and see what they're saying in their eyes. Somebody else would say to me, well, I don't know what they're saying in their eyes. Well, in many terrorist attacks, they cover their faces and all you see is their eyes. And you can tell by the look in their eyes that they are serious. You can tell by the look in their eyes that we can be frightened just by the look in their eyes. And it's the same way with victims. Quite often victims will have that look in their eyes. I often had it and wished that somebody could see me. They saw me, they looked at me, but they really didn't see me. And they didn't ask questions. They criticized me. Why does she smell like that? Why is she dressed like that? But they never questioned, they never talked to me. They just looked past me as if I was not their concern or responsibility. And we do that quite often as human beings. We look past other people. You know, it's not my business. It's you know, not my concern. I don't have time for that. I have my own set of, you know, issues. And we just never know when that person's life is hanging on a thread, and that thread is called, can you see me? You know. Human trafficking is a $150 billion business. It's not a small business. There are almost 22 million people being trafficked throughout the world today. Pope John Francis called it it is a wound on contemporary society today. It is modern day slavery. And when you look the other way at someone else's misfortune and exploitation, it just puts us all that much closer to being exploited ourselves. You know, looking past someone else's pain and suffering puts us in a position to be next. And it can happen to anyone. It can happen to anyone. Professional, or those of us who are flight attendants, we have this wonderful job. We travel all over the world. We meet all kind of wonderful people. You just never know. It's important when you meet somebody on the airplane that you don't go anywhere with them by yourself initially. You don't know them. And if they're calling you too much or following you, or if they show up where you are too often, you might want to tell your flying partner, hey, this guy's been following me. You know what I mean? He's been stalking me. He calls me. So it's just important to know, to be situationally aware. It really is.
We have a very young crew, very young staff, and most of them come from all parts of the world.
Sure.
And you've mentioned something today when you feel that it is appropriate, that it is a good moment, that you can engage with somebody. You should engage in non-threatening, polite conversation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. For somebody who might not know necessarily how to break that ice, or who's not speaking English as a first language,
Right.
a few lines you can share. How would you kind of approach maybe somebody and get that info that you would want?
Well,
get that clue out.
Our job is to be friendly, and sometimes our conversation has to have an undertone. The conversation can't always be just because I want to be friendly. Sometimes our conversations have to have an underlying motivation. So first thing I did is to do the who, what, when, where. Who, what, when, where. Kind of break your conversation. So where are you from? Where are you all traveling from? You know, you going to Disney World when you get to, well, we're going to Orlando. Are you going to Disney World? You know, you have family there? Those kind of who, what are you going to be doing there? Where are you staying? You all staying in town? How'd you all end up flying on Emirates? You know, who told you about our airline? Have you flown on us before? Really, did you enjoy it? What did you enjoy about it? Did you fly with your mom, your dad then too? So you use the who, what, when, where, you know, and how, however you need to do it to break the ice. But that's kind of one of those you can absolutely go to. Maybe you don't do the what, maybe the what, maybe you do the who and the when, maybe you're doing the where and the why. Maybe the other flight attendant will do the who and the what. You know what I'm saying? Because if it looks suspicious and it's one person paying too much attention, that will alarm them. So maybe the other flight attendant could walk up and say, hey, I was looking at them. This is a cute family, right? And the person, the trafficker may say, yeah. And the victim may give you a look that says, ain't my daddy, it ain't my mama, this not my husband. You know? So we have to read, exactly, we have to read body language and facial expressions as well.
And do they kind of match with your kind of positive tone that you're
Yes.
giving them? Are you getting the same back?
Exactly. Are you getting a response or are you getting nothing?
Is there a way people who are out of the States can get
Yes.
involved in?
Two things. You want to go online. You can go on to airlineamb.org, airlineamb.org, and register on there. Let us know you're interested and what you're interested in. Airline Ambassadors has 3 programs. We have disaster relief, where we raise funds and aircraft and supplies to go into areas where there's either a designed or a natural disaster. And then we also do medical escort, and we're always looking for flight attendants and travel and airline personnel. We pick up children who need medical treatment. From their families, we take them to the United States. We leave them with foster families for their medical treatment. When it's time for the child to come back home, we go and get them. We bring them back to their home. And so Airline Ambassadors coordinates all the effort, the hotel, the expenses. The airlines donate miles, and that's how we move about. So there's medical escort, and then there's human trafficking awareness training. So if someone wanted to get involved in that, the first thing I would suggest is to do a training, because what happens is when the training is complete, you get those individuals to say, I would really like to be a trainer, because everybody's not going to want to do that. But some people are going to be like, I really want to get involved with training. I really want to get involved with getting the information out. And so our goal is to train trainers, so that information can be taken back and disseminated throughout the company at every level. You may do a safety and security training, and it may be a little different than what you do with your flight crew training, and that may be a little different than what you do with your ground crew. Your ticket agents and gate agents may get something different as well. The indicators are always going to be the same, but perhaps the method that they approach it with, because your ticket and gate agents are not going to be with the victims and the traffickers for as long as flight attendants. And then your ground personnel, everybody needs to be trained. So our key is to train trainers. Everybody, Uber drivers are getting people, we're getting ready to partner with Uber around the world, because Uber drivers have said, we've got these girls and little boys getting in our cars late at night. They've been, abused, and guy gets in and takes their money. We don't know what to do. And so it's all aspects of the travel industry, but specifically with aviation, because we move fast, whereas buses and trains don't move as fast, and cruise ships. aviation is a fast-paced industry, so that's why traffickers like to use it. And so it's important for all the aspects, all the different players in the aviation industry and the aviation business, even the people that work in the gift shops. So it's important that everyone is trained, but without us having to go around the world and train everybody, it's important to train trainers, because that also means that the training is always updated, because you're going to update it based on your protocol, whatever your standards are, and that's going to help us. The other piece of that is we'll be able to keep up with numbers and how many reports were made and how many how many incidents were reported. So you want to go to airlineamb.org, register on there with airline ambassadors. It might, and so we get enough people in a certain area, we'll look and say, hey, we need to go do a training over there. There's a bunch of people that want to be trained.
Right.
And I've already, today I had people from Iraq, Iran, Yemen, and some other places that say, I want to be trained. I would love to get the training. I would love to be, involved with airline ambassadors in my country. So, and that's what we're looking for. We want everyone to be trained. And I think what's most important is that there has to be a global standard of indicators, recognition, and reporting, so that we can keep up with the fact that the human trafficking is decreasing. That's the only way we're really going to know that it is decreasing. And what's going to happen is traffickers are going to realize they've been exposed, and they will be less likely to come forward and use aviation as a means of transporting victims.